No, not really. I expected it would be much higher, and it was last year was 25%, so we're up 9 points. Given that we had historic soaring performance through 2018, as you know, this past year it's the first time they've crossed the $100 billion mark in revenues, and at 101. But they had an incredible year last year, and still a quarter, 25% wanted to separate the roles. There is a cosmetic value in that. There's absolutely no research. If there are any governistas watching that want to challenge me, they're wrong. There's no research that separating these roles is ever preventive. You take the top 200 disastrous governance failures of the past decade and a half, almost all of them already had separation of roles. Enron, WorldCom, name it. So it doesn't prevent. However, there's a cosmetic reassurance. And sometimes when there's a crisis, if there's a complete lack of trust, and we're not at that point yet with Boeing, that maybe separating the roles transitionally helps. As when the New York Stock Exchange here had a crisis a dozen years ago, they separated the roles and it was helpful, and we've seen it sometimes help.
I mean, this is why we turn to you. You're like an encyclopedia of management crises. How severe is it for Boeing and specifically for Dennis Muilenburg at this point? Well,
if we think about devastating crises, the famous Tylenol recall at Johnson & Johnson and Jim Burke, or Mickey Arison of Carnival Cruise Lines, one handled very badly and that second one handled very well and the second one handled very badly, or the BP Deepwater Horizon issues. This is far more complicated than General Motors and Mary Barra had to deal with it. But Mary Barra, Jim Burke, David Neeleman of JetBlue, or Arnie Sorensen this year in the data crisis breach did a magnificent job of getting ahead of it. However, in support of Boeing and Dennis Muilenburg on this is infinitely more complex. Of course, losing over 300 lives it's hard to follow. You hear the victim's family speaking, and nothing equalizes that. Nothing responds to that. However, in terms of what happened, when there are bad guy situations we've talked about where the stuff was concealed, there's not a bad guy of concealing and deception that we're aware of at this point. However, there is disappointing, obviously, operationally, something failed, and the information has been trickling out, and unfortunately, Boeing wasn't ahead of it. Some things we were reading about in the newspapers because the consultants to Boeing and aviation authorities were putting it out publicly at the same time their clients were hearing about it. So that was distressing, and seeing a link between the Ethiopian and Indonesian situations where it was initially denied, and all the regulators were just as confused as the rest of us.